We have a sense of optimism for the 2021 NHL season, so we have some latest updates on how negotiations have gone here in the past day or so. We also have some trade rumors focusing on teams like the Oilers, the Maple Leafs, and the Wild, and we have an update on some pretty important players who won't be going to the World Junior Championships. We'll discuss all that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have a variety of news to talk about here today, and I want to kick things off with the latest news on some players' availability for the World Junior Championships. Now, Team Canada got a fairly big blow, but one that they were pretty well expecting. The New York Rangers have confirmed that top draft pick, first overall in the 2020 draft, Alexis Lafreniere, will not be released to go to the World Junior Championships and represent Canada. So obviously adding him would have been absolutely huge. He dominated that tournament last year, and I would have suspected that he would have been even more dominant this year, given he's had another year of experience here, obviously still more mature, and obviously would have been a huge dominant factor. But the good news for Canada is they have a really deep team. The only question mark for me with that team is between the pipes, but in the forward group where he would play, they're in good hands, so I don't think it's going to be a huge letdown. But it would have been nice to see him at that tournament, just because the NHL won't be going in the end of December. But, of course, the NHL could be going in January, which we're going to touch on here in a few minutes. And the Rangers want him available for when NHL training camps get underway, which is certainly understandable. They want to protect their asset, and they obviously want to get him into the NHL training camp and games as soon as possible. So, not a huge surprise, but a little bit of a disappointment there for Canadian fans. Now, on the Team USA front, another name that surfaced as potentially getting released, and obviously a big factor would have been where things are at with the NHL season. But even though he's basically 2 years from being drafted, he's still eligible. And that's New Jersey Devils center and former first overall pick Jack Hughes. Technically could go play for Team USA. And there was some talk that maybe the Devils would send him if it was looking like the NHL season was going to be either canceled or delayed enough that he wouldn't miss any time at training camp. But they have also confirmed that Jack Hughes will not be going. So right now, like I said, there's a lot of sense of optimism that we're going to touch on here shortly about the NHL 2021 season coming together. A lot of good progress is made. There's still more that's going to be needed to make it happen, but at least we have a little bit more of a positive vibe than we did a couple of days ago. So we'll see how that goes, and as I said, we'll get into those updates here in a couple minutes' time. Now, obviously, a couple other quick items here as well on the trade rumor front. We are hearing rumors on the Edmonton Oilers. Now, can't say exactly what they have up their sleeve, but it's been reported by Kurt Levens of the Edmonton Journal that he fully suspects the Oilers have a few moves kind of up their sleeve, and they're kind of waiting for the season to be ironed out, as well as training camps to open before they make a move. But they do have something that they're working on. Could be on the blue line. Obviously, Oscar Klefbom could be put on long-term injury reserve, which could open up some possibilities. Could they maybe make a move between the pipes? Difficult to say exactly what it would be, but I do think it's fair to say that a lot of teams are going to be busy again once we get a confirmed season. Now, obviously, in this Oilers rumor, that is one of many, but also Thomas Drance of The Athletic, who mainly covers the Vancouver Canucks, also had an article out which I thought had a lot of good points as well, indicating that we should probably see like a second wave of trades and signings. Now, obviously, we're getting a second wave right now in many areas in North America and around the world of COVID, and now because of everything right now and uncertainty, we've seen a standstill for a number of weeks with no NHL trades, no NHL signings. Everything's at a gridlock, and once we get a season confirmed, assuming we do, and we know the details, there's a lot of unsigned players right now. You know, there's going to have to be movement. There's teams that have to become cap compliant. Like, there's going to be a big flurry of activity. Now, if we get an agreement here, let's say in the next week, then we could have a very busy NHL news cycle. Maybe in the second half of December, closer to Christmas, as teams prepare to get ready for training camp, and it could even drag on into the early parts of NHL training camp. So, like I said, there's teams that have no choice here. There's going to be moves, which is going to be great from an entertainment perspective, and obviously from a news perspective, give us plenty here to talk about. So watch the Oilers, but watch many other teams as well. Lots of free agents out there that need to be signed, and we should get that flurry of activity here once we get more details confirmed up for the season. Now, another bit of a rumor, more of a rumor update, if anything, I guess you could say, because there's not really a ton of new information, but there's still talk about the Minnesota Wild and Matt Dumba. Came across some more information, another article today on that front, that really they're kind of holding still, like many teams are right now, and possibly trading the defenseman. Obviously, he's a player who very well doesn't have a long future in Minnesota. You never know, that could change, but given the fact that they have 3 other defensemen on a long-term big money contract, puts him at number 4 when it comes to that on their list, and they can only protect ideally 3 for the expansion draft unless they go 8 skaters, which means they could do 4, but it's going to leave them short in the forward group too, which might be the better way to go for Minnesota. Like, I don't think it's an absolute given that Dumba gets traded, but I think the likelihood is high, mainly because he could bring back a good asset to help them within that forward group. Bill Guerin's already started making progress here on kind of rebuilding that forward group, and obviously they need a top center, and Dumba could be the guy to help bring that back. So obviously I think a Dumba trade is still very likely, but I'm not certain that it's going to happen before the season gets underway, even though I do expect a big flurry of activity, unless the team comes calling with a number 1, number 2 type of center iceman. I don't see it happen. I think Bill Guerin will remain patient there and see what happens, but I would not be surprised to see Dumba traded in season or at the end of the season, because I just don't see Minnesota, ponying up here on the blue line that much. Because the other thing too, he's got a couple more years left at $6 million, and to extend him out along with Brodin and Spurgeon and Suter, that's a lot of money in their blue line. They have other areas of the team that need to be addressed, and it just seems like a foregone conclusion to me at some point that it's going to happen. Just a matter of where and when. But another quick note here on Minnesota too, while we're at it, is they could be without Matt Zuccarello to start the season. Actually, it's pretty likely by looks of things. Apparently a few weeks back, according to Michael Russo, the Athletic, he had to have surgery on one of his arms, and he's likely going to miss the start, and it could even turn out to be significant. It sounded like there was not quite clear yet on the timetable for recovering and returning, so that could cause some issues. I mean, he was over in Norway, from what I've understood. I believe he's come to Minnesota to be around team doctors and be evaluated, all that kind of stuff, get his quarantine out of the way so that he can do what he can in Minnesota to start working on his rehab, but I'm not sure exactly what the timeline is, but another offensive veteran there that could be out to start the season. So I think Minnesota could have a tough year depending on exactly where they end up with their schedule. They could end up in the Western Conference teams as well. So we'll see what happens. That might actually be a benefit too, because those California teams aren't as strong, but we will see. But I expect a flurry of activity out of Minnesota too, just a matter of when. But Dumba, it could be something that we don't see for a while until we get closer to the expansion draft. Now, we come across some more information on the Leafs and William Nylander again, which surprised me very much. I don't think we're going to see the Maple Leafs make a significant trade right now or anytime before the season starts. I'd be somewhat surprised if it happened in Season 2, unless they get off to an absolutely terrible start. But given the fact that we're 90% certain that we're going to see the All-Canadian division, if we have hockey, which is trending in the right direction now, that I think the Leafs will do very well in that division. Hard to say how they'll do in the playoffs, because we don't know what kind of format we're going to get. But at this point, I would think that their regular season would be good, so therefore I'd be surprised if we saw a big splash during the season. Now, would it make sense to trade Nylander for a defenseman? Absolutely. And I've said before, if the Leafs decide that big four group of forwards making a ton of money needs to be broken up, I think he's going to be the one to go, because given that contract, it's pretty valuable right now, and I think it's going to be the easier one to move, and it could still get a great asset in return. So to me, it could happen, but I don't see it happening anytime soon. But the latest information, again, links him to the Flyers. He's been linked to the Flyers off and on for about 2 years. Back when he did his contract negotiations here, when he was an RFA holdout, he was linked to the Flyers a fair bit. They were reportedly in the offer sheet consideration to try to lure him from Toronto. Obviously, it never happened. I'm not sure if they presented one and it never got signed, because sometimes those things didn't get reported. I know there was some talk about different offer sheets between Marner and Nylander both when they were going through the negotiations, but obviously they never signed one. But at the end of the day here, the latest reports do indicate that the Flyers and Leafs have been talking about a trade which involves a top defenseman going to Toronto. But again, I don't see this happening. I'm only bringing it up here because I've seen it, again, making its way through a little bit of a news cycle, and I was kind of surprised. I would not put much stock into that. I mean, you never know. You can never say never, but I'd be shocked right now if the Leafs made a significant trade. Now, many would feel that Shane Gostisbehere would probably be that defenseman, but at this point, I'm not sure we can really call him a solid top four defenseman, given how he's played the past couple of years. So to me, if the Leafs were going to do that deal, they'd probably be looking at more like a guy like a Travis Sanheim probably would be the one. I can't imagine the Flyers would be interested in partnering with Provorov, so Sanheim would likely be that guy. And I'm not sure that the Flyers would really want to do that. I'm not sure that they really need to do that right now. They obviously have some pretty good depth on the blue line, but at the same time, they have a pretty good forward group too. So I think the Flyers are in a situation like the Leafs. I think they want to kind of play this season out really before they do a whole lot. I mean, they did have some rumors before around a guy like a JVR, but a potential trade, but that's not going to be easy to do. So William Nylander to the Flyers is the latest buzz. It seems to be making its way around the internet here. I'm only talking about it because I obviously talk about what's going through the rumor mill. I don't see there being anything to this, though, myself. Maybe someday, hard to say, but I don't see the Leafs making a significant splash in the trade front, at the very least until we get to next offseason, assuming things don't go as planned. But if they have a good, successful year, they make some progress, win a round or two in the playoffs, I think Kyle Dubas is going to keep giving them some leash here and not make a move, and as long as they're moving in the right direction. And they have to see how things go this year with all the veteran leadership that he brought in to see how that goes before they really take that to another consideration here. And obviously those four guys that are getting paid big bucks, how they play, can they get the job done? All that has to be factored in. And I think it's a little early. With all the moves Toronto already made, why would they make a deal like that now without putting this team on the ice to see what they have and to see how well that team can compete with the other top teams in the Eastern Conference? So I am taking that rumor and I'm completely putting it to rest that I don't think there's anything to that. But I do see the fact that the Flyers likely do have interest in him because it's been so many times I've heard it come up in the past couple of years. So I think there's some truth to that part of it, but that's about it. And I don't think it's going to go anywhere any further anytime soon. So we'll revisit that in the future should it come up again, but not going to happen in my opinion. Now lastly, as I said, the latest update on this season for 2021 was we had some good progress here, good positive talks. Last night, especially Thursday night into Friday here, apparently the league and the PA have kind of taken the financial problems that they were talking about and kind of set it aside and said, you know what, let's focus on the part that's going to be a little bit easier and getting the framework of the season kind of hammered out here first, and we'll revisit that after. So they made good progress. There's reports that they have a 52 and a 56 game season on the table for consideration. That January 1st date likely gets bumped back to closer to the middle of the month. Probably around the 15th. Training camps will likely open around January the 2nd, or possibly even the 1st, but more likely January 2nd. But the 7 non-playoff teams who didn't get to go to the return to play in the summertime were promised more time, so I'm not sure how that's going to work, but there was talk that maybe they would open up their camps after Christmas and get that week between Christmas and New Year's in there as well. They could always, have 4 or 5 days of camp, maybe give them a day or so break for New Year's and then come back on the 2nd. I'm not sure because I don't think we're going to get a whole lot of preseason or if any action this year. So obviously that might be the best that these teams can do. So that's kind of where that is at. Obviously the financial stuff is still up in the air. We haven't heard any more too about whether or not they're playing in their own arenas. So I know we reported yesterday that some teams were looking at outdoor venues. Haven't heard any more updates in that regard. But as I said yesterday, the outdoor venue part I do think will be difficult to pull off, even though it's a cool idea. I do like it. I just don't know that it's going to work really, but we'll see what happens. I guess there's a lot of uncertainty right now, but at least things are progressing in the right direction. We've heard from the player agents indicating that the players are not going to be given in here to the owner's demands to increase escrow and deferrals. At this point, I will be really surprised if they do bend and give in here on escrow. If anything, they might come back and say, we will give you a bigger deferral, but I don't think it's going to be as much as the owners want, and it makes sense that they're going to want something in return. So I mentioned before, maybe they ask for that money to be paid back with interest. So really, for some players, if they're getting paid this money in a couple of years' time, when escrow is lower, and if they get it with interest, they could be taking home substantially more cash. So it might be in their best interest to really consider that. So I do think that's a possibility, but I know there's some pretty hard voices here on the PA side of things saying, absolutely not. They're not bending. And negotiations took place before. A deal was done and they wanted it adhered to. And I don't blame them. But at some point here, we need to have a give and take here. Like I said, they might have to give in a little bit, but with something in return. You got to make it worth their while here, and it's really in everybody's worthwhile that we have hockey. Otherwise, there's no revenue generated all year, which is bad for everybody, especially bad for the fans too. They could lose fans over this. It's a dangerous situation. So I guess we will see, but at least things are sounding much more positive. They've been able to come to an agreement on a lot of the framework. Of course, we don't have it completely hammered out. We don't have any kind of a firm agreement in place or anything like that. But at least we have a much better idea how things are going to look, and that part seems to be okay. They just need to address the elephant in the room here and overcome the financial part of it before we can officially say there's a deal in place and we know when there's going to be hockey. But at least it sounds like both sides want to play, which is more than I can say a couple days ago based on the rhetoric coming from Bettman and the owners. To me, it sounded a lot like the terminology and everything that we heard back before when they had the lockout, and at least things to me now sound a little bit more positive. So at least I think there's a much better chance that we'll have hockey, just a matter of when and exactly how it will look. So in all Canadian divisions, but a given. But the rest of the American divisions need to be ironed out, as well as some other things too. So we'll see what happens. That is my update here for today. So let me know your thoughts on everything down in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.